trained support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, call him Eric Podmonger. It's Andy Greenwald.
You told me you had some nicknames.
Good morning to Alex Shibutani and no one else.
Do you want to talk about that?
Go for it, man.
We are so thrilled to discover, thanks to Entertainment Weekly, that we are the official culture pod of the Shibsibs. That when these beautiful, talented athletes representing our nation so well at the Winter Olympics, when they want to unwind to a pop culture podcast, apparently
they have me screaming in your face about the Eagles.
So let's go USA.
Shout out to the Shibsibs. So happy to have them as listeners. Andy.
Yeah.
Happy Black Panther Monday. We have a great show for you today. For you listeners, not for you. It's a tough one
I'm
for
just
you.
going to sit back.
Today on the podcast, Andy and I will break down Black Panther, obviously the most popular movie in America.
Maybe ever.
Which I will be talking about extensively. And then in the second half of the pod, we are joined by our old friend, Jonathan Abrams. We used to work with Abrams over at Grantland. He has an incredible book out right now that you should put in your cart. Go to your local independent bookstore and support it. All the Pieces Matter, an oral history of The Wire. It is awesome. It is a fantastic book about. Can I just say it's the best show of all time?
Yeah, probably.
People argue with me, but whatever. It's the best show of all time.
We talked to him already. We're doing this intro now. I hedged a little bit, but it probably is the best show.
Yeah, I think when all the chips are down,
yeah,
you could make that statement. Okay, Andy, one of the most exciting things about this moment, this Black Panther moment, is that it is a moment.
Yes, I agree.
From the just really high approval rating I have for everybody involved in this movie's media appearances,
delightful,
to just an excellent soundtrack. Maybe the best inspired by the movie or soundtrack. I'm just really King's Dead is on a loop for me.
Yeah.
The Black Panther soundtrack is great. It obviously is just propelling through box office records left and right. And what really struck me as we were coming out of it, and The Ringer has a ton of great content up about this movie. We got an exit survey. Cam wrote a wonderful review. Micah wrote a great piece about the history. Sean wrote an awesome piece about why it's different than all these other Marvel movies. There's also wonderful writing elsewhere on the web that you should check out, especially Jelani Cobb's piece in The New Yorker.
Loved it.
So I love that we have something that is making us think. I love that this is sparking so much actual conversation, and there is some trolley debate happening in other realms, but for the most part, I think that the conversations that people are having about this movie are really thought-provoking, really stimulating, and you and I spend so much time talking about television as this and its role in the monoculture, its role in the water cooler, and I feel like with Jedi, with a couple of other movies, I'm starting to feel the scale tip back towards movies. That this is something that we can all anticipate. We can all watch if we so choose. We can all go on the opening weekend and check it out. And yeah, maybe some people will be like, "This got spoiled for me before I got a chance to see it." But for the most part, and P.S., this will be a spoiler pod,
such as it is.
Such as it is. And now it's Monday, and we're all talking about Black Panther. And I got text message threads with 5 or 6 other people talking about Black Panther all weekend.
Me too.
I bumped the soundtrack all weekend. I've been reading about it all weekend.
I traveled to Busan, South Korea this weekend.
You got your what was that character's name? Stephanie Sophia?
Which
the
one?
person outside of the stand.
The one who's shucking cockles?
Yeah, and then it's
there?
just you can go in the club.
Look, I don't know. I wasn't at the Winter Olympics, but that's how South Korea works, I believe.
This is, to me, one of the stories of the many stories that people can say about Black Panther is it is movies kind of muscling back in and no, we are the central pop cultural conversation topic.
I agree with you. I think that that's been trending that way recently, and I think it's kind of exciting, and I say that even obviously as a TV devotee. I think that we are not all watching the same shows, but every so often we all go to the movies, and that's really fun. And I think that folds really neatly into the opening point I really wanted to make, which is there is the movie Black Panther and there's the phenomenon Black Panther around it, and we're going to talk about both, but I think it's important to say that they are inextricably linked, and that's not a bad thing.
No.
I think that here's where I wanted to start. Ryan Coogler directed this film. Good job by you. Good job by you. And of course, because this movie has been so successful and his previous movies were so successful, there's been a lot of talk of comparing him, linking him to someone like Steven Spielberg in terms of...
Yeah, Sean was tweeting about today about has there ever been a director who came out of the gates with going 3 for 3 like this?
Pop culture wise, and also ability wise,
and just clearly showing a progression of ability to handle bigger and bigger
yes.
stages. Yeah,
and that is even more crucial now that to be a successful filmmaker, you do need to negotiate with the world of franchises and the world of pre-existing IP and et cetera. I think one of the most remarkable things to me about this and about what Coogler did is he made a Marvel movie that feels so much larger than the Marvel universe, that feels like, as you said, a phenomenon and an event, not just because we're reading all the takes and the tweets, but during the watching of the movie, this feels like something huge. And I remember, and I know you remember too, and people our age and people who were the Stranger Things kids, more or less, remember, even if you didn't read Entertainment Weekly didn't exist. Even if you didn't read People magazine or watch Entertainment Tonight, we knew who Steven Spielberg was. Yeah. We knew when a Steven Spielberg movie arrived. Steven Spielberg movies, and I think they still do to some degree, felt like events. They felt like they were coming in the culture. We saw the posters. We would go see them. His understanding of how to tug on our heartstrings, but also entertain us and dazzle us and bring in the sweeping scores. They were different than other movies. Obviously a different era in terms of what blockbuster movies were. But Indiana Jones movies didn't feel like sequels.
Yeah.
They felt like events. And it's that DNA that I really wanted to begin with in terms of what Coogler has been able to do here. We saw that in Creed. I mean, you and I, being Super Bowl champions from Philadelphia, will always point to that ATV scene. But think about what that does for the audience. Think about the way it lights you on fire from the inside.
Sure. I mean, so does the diner scene. So does the one shot. So does him almost punching the wall in Tijuana. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many great moments.
And so there are moments in Black Panther where there were down moments. I have criticisms of the film because it's a Marvel movie on some level, but there were also moments when I felt overwhelmed with emotion and with joy, and when I was just near tears because of what I was seeing and how exciting and exhilarating it was. And I think to be able to talk about a movie like that in 2018 within the structure of movies in 2018, it's Marvel, Disney, it's all the global concerns that went into it. I think that's a triumph.
Yeah, I think there's also it's worth saying in comparison to Spielberg, especially with Jaws forward, he started to create the culture. It wasn't a reactive piece of art. He was creating the Harrison Ford mythos, which informed a lot of male personalities. He was creating these ideas about heroism, or these ideas about family, or these ideas of how to mix, profane humor with deep sentimentalism, and fear with exhilaration.
Jurassic Park is at once a horror movie and kind of a goofy kids movie.
Sure, and I think that you could look at Black Panther, and you can see a James Bond movie in there, and you can see an adventure movie in there, and you can see this royal court kind of Game of Thrones style political movie in there, and you can see obviously a film that I would have really cut my own hand off to see, which is the 1992 Oakland movie.
Yo, good luck for Too Short.
Here's the thing:
in this
I'm
movie.
a 40-year-old guy. It's not really up to me. It's like I get it.
Sterling Brown put in work in that apartment set.
Can we talk? I want to talk about all of the the six men of this movie, but that is the best origin story I've seen in a very long time. I mean, you get so bored of these things that every movie it's like, no. And then, my mom's pearls got taken, and I became Batman. And it's like, no, man, this is wild. The spy story set in Oakland in '92 is great. Sean wrote about that a lot in his piece, and it was just like, yes.
I think that one of the things that you can say is that, look, it doesn't reinvent the wheel, because we are in a moment when wheels are very popular, and wheels are superhero movies.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So now we're getting these exhilarating other looks at wheels that we've never seen before, which is why Wonder Woman was both good and successful. That is all really important. But I also... the movie really inspired me as a superhero and comic book fan. And this may be a small detour, but you mentioned Batman. I wanted to say that. I do think that we are coming to the end, or we're really dealing with the dregs of the Batman generation. What I mean is, Batman, great character. I am not here to slag on Batman. But Batman's origin story, so he is a privileged loner who's had a bad thing happen in his childhood and puts on a mask at night and beats people up. That's one strain of superheroism, and it has resulted in obviously great stories and great movies. But I've also always been interested and drawn to, as many people have, the outsider storyline.
Sure.
It's always been part of comic books.
Yeah.
Superman is an immigrant. Superman was created by two Jewish guys in their 20s about the state of the world. And Black Panther was created by two Jewish guys during a moment of civil rights struggle in this country. And the opportunity of comic books and these types of stories to make us dream bigger, to connect our current world to mythology, to legends, to culture, that's sort of gone fallow, I think, because we're in this sort of, I don't want to say toxic, but at times it can be toxic culture of, sometimes I can see a line between like fierce, protective comic book geek culture fandom and sort of the toxic culture online.
We just went through it with Last Jedi.
We've been through this. There is another strain of this, too, that has always been deeply inspiring to a lot of people, particularly people who felt like outsiders at some point in their life. And so to see Coogler and the people who made this movie pick up a thread here and connect Marvel movies, which we've liked and disliked, and connect it to something cultural and optimistic and utopian was truly thrilling.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Marvel movies aren't cool. You know, like it's Chris Evans wearing a baseball hat with no logo. It's Robert Downey Jr. like dressed like a 1980s Hollywood agent with a slightly better fitting pants. It's guys driving Audis that are corporate sponsorships, so they're
Shouts to Lexus.
Yeah.
Good sponsorship this time around.
I'm not saying, and there's plenty of that in this
teasing.
movie,
Yeah.
but there is an overall aesthetic to it, even though it's broken up into these disparate parts. And I think that the first 30 minutes are different than the middle 50 minutes, that are way different than the last 60 minutes or whatever, however it breaks down. But I think that there is an overall aesthetic to the movie with the music, the performances, and like I was saying about being a proactive contributor to the culture, I think that people are going to be talking about Killmonger, and they're going to be talking about the King's Guard for a long time. Those are like additions to the culture. They're not just like echoes of the culture. They're not just, oh yeah, that was also cool how like he just kind of retconned a couple of things. They are now like in our consciousness.
Yeah.
We're going to be making jokes and references, and we're going to mention things like Wakanda Forever in going forward for years to come.
And by the way, we should also note that while Black Panther was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, characters like the Dore Milaje, I don't know how to say that right, the all-female militia that guards him, Shuri, his sister, played so brilliantly by Letitia Wright. These characters were created by Black comic creators, by Christopher Priest and Reginald Hudlin. So it's part of a continuum that is truly exciting, and it feels fresh. But you're talking about things that are being added to the fictional culture. It was so smart, and in retrospect, necessary. And kudos to the Marvel Entertainment Brain Trust for allowing this to happen, to ground this movie in a different kind of reality. Wakanda certainly does not exist. The technology in this movie doesn't exist, but Oakland exists.
Yeah.
And more essentially, the argument that Killmonger has with T'Challa in the movie, I mean, that is fascinating. That is a vital conversation that has existed for long before pop culture commentators like us jumped in to weigh in on it.
Yeah, it's also like it goes across it's across
Shakespearean.
centuries. Yeah,
but it also, and this is why we like that Jelani Cobb piece in the New Yorker so much that I tweeted. This is a movie that puts a bullseye on the hyphen between African and American. Would it have been cool to see 100 movies that do that don't also require action sequences in South Korea? Of course. But look what he did.
Yeah,
on the
I also
biggest stage.
happen to really. I think that the action sequence in South Korea is my favorite set piece. Does it need to be there?
Yeah.
No. Do they need to? Why did they go to Busan? I don't know. But could they just have done something a little bit more adjacent to Wakanda or to London or wherever? I don't know why the CIA buy of vibranium had to happen in Busan. Let's talk a little bit about the Busan sequence, because I think that that's one you and I were talking about, where it's like, why is this happening? But if you're going to get a movie like this, and if you get to make a Marvel movie, and Marvel, I think, are at once, they seem to be permissive when a director is like, here's the vibe I want to go for. If
like James Gunn with Guardians of the
and
Galaxy.
if Taika Waititi wants to do a kind of Buckaroo Banzai, like zany comedy in space, he can do it. He just has to have Loki and Thor wind up on a spaceship floating through space at the end of it, so that it connects to the next Avengers movie or whatever. So I think what they allow you to do is play within the sandbox. And I think that Ryan Coogler did a really cool job of, I mean, there is a James Bond movie in the middle of this movie where it's like, here's your cool shit, here's your cool car, go to a casino, have a fight in a casino. And I just wanted to kind of go over maybe a few of our favorite moments in that way.
I also think that I mean, I called that out only because I was less interested in the things that seem to be doing the typical Marvel stuff, like the punching at the end that it always ends up with. But
although,
let's
just
also
shout out to Andy Serkis' SoundCloud joke.
The strongest example of Coogler's untouched power on this movie is that there was no Dan Harmon on set throwing alts like he was in Doctor Strange. The jokes, they weren't great in this movie. The SoundCloud, I'm a SoundCloud rapper thing, it didn't really play so well, but that was clearly not effed with, which I respect. But to your point about the South Korea thing, we've sort of not said this head on. It was so fucking awesome to see black actors get to play these parts and do these things. To see whether it's the super heroic action scene, the rescue scene, the glamorous nightclub scene, these actors don't get to play these parts altogether. We don't get to see them. And this is a crime. This is 2018. It was, if nothing else, and I say this intentionally, like I mean this with the weight that I'm putting behind it, the movie is worth it for these incredible, incredible opportunities for representation that it gave us, and brilliant performances by movie stars, by the way. Beautiful movie stars who look great playing these scenes and wearing these suits and throwing people over craps tables.
Yeah, and I think the most important part of it is that it was written with depth, and it was written with different, like really good characterization where each character had a different take. I mean, Lupita Nyong'o's character was a spy. I love the fact that comes up multiple times where they're like, you get to be a spy and go out into the world and not worry about it, and I serve the country. And that's that Okoye has that conversation with her. I thought that was fascinating.
And it's impossible to watch the movie without bringing in everything we're bringing in from behind the scenes in the world we live in, where we remember that Lupita Nyong'o is a Academy Award winner whose follow-up, and now no one knew she was going to win an Oscar for that, but her follow-up to that movie is she played a stewardess on a Gerard Butler Passenger 57 knockoff, right?
It was Liam Neeson. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Liam Neeson. You're better than Gerard Butler. But like, okay, you know what she should be? She should be the star of a blockbuster film where she gets to be a glamorous spy also. Like, let's give us these things and let's give them those opportunities too.
Do you want to nitpick it all?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of punching.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of punching. There's some narrative stuff that I'm like, really? Okay, sure. But the overall feeling that I took out of it was this exhilaration and joy, and a lot of the nits that I want to pick were papered over, especially in the days since I saw it, by remembering the performances.
Well, I want to talk about Killmonger. I want to, because I think that it's possibly the best Marvel character I've ever seen on screen.
Really interesting. Yep.
I don't know that I'm 100% on board with the performance.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting performance. It's I think pitched at almost a theatrical, stagey kind of performance by Jordan, and I assume in collaboration with Coogler, because obviously they've worked together 3 times, and I'm sure will continue to do so. I wonder, the rest of the film feels like it has this mix of naturalism, and they get to have these human moments, and they get to have comedic moments. And there was a report, and obviously all first cuts are long because you're just like, here's the stuff I've put together, and we can start cutting it down. But there was a report that Coogler had like a 4-hour cut of the first cut of Black Panther.
Yeah.
Now, that may have just been like, here's all the stuff we're thinking about, but probably we're going to focus
Here's another
in.
hour of rhino training.
Well, I wonder if there was another hour of Killmonger. I wonder where they made the decision to Joker him and make him off screen, you know? Because for the most part, in Dark Knight, Joker, especially is like an apparition that's existing
He's a force
around
of
the
nature
movie,
that swoops in.
and it takes a while for him to show up. And I mean, obviously he's in the bank scene, but he's just around the edges of the film. And when you see him, you're like, I can't keep my eyes off him. And I felt the same way about Killmonger, but it was very specifically about a character and not necessarily about the performance. And I wonder whether, I mean, he's got a girlfriend. We don't really, and she just disappears at a certain point, you know?
Well, he shoots her.
Yes, right. I mean, but like he has a life outside of his singular mission in life. And
He's got those E40 glasses
Right.
that he wears to the museum.
and he's got I felt like that's another movie. I don't know.
I
But
agree with you.
Jordan, especially once he gets to Wakanda, feels a little stiff.
Yeah, there's a moment when he's in the throne room, and his performance and the choices he's made for the type of character he's playing definitely clashes with not only the
and maybe that's the point.
That's what I'm just going to say. Not only the regal pomp of the scene, but also potentially the what is the green screen and what isn't. We're in Atlanta. What's going on here? You know, he was suddenly folded into the Marvel universe in a way where the character is not in the first part of the film. You could charitably say that's intentional. That's a collision that's meant to feel a little bit off. And we're never really going to get an answer to it.
Look, the depth of feeling in the scene between him and Sterling K. Brown and the flashback when they go to meet the ancestors is like, like that doesn't happen in Marvel movies.
The interesting thing about it is,
turns out Michael B. Jordan's just really good acting with like dads.
There's something there.
Yeah.
T'Challa as a character is in many ways the least interesting character in the movie. That's a hallmark of a lot of superhero movies where the villains are generally more interesting. This movie succeeds because the supporting cast is really interesting. I was really struck watching Chadwick Boseman's performance and Michael B. Jordan's performance. Obviously, there was some. Chadwick Boseman was cast first years ago before Coogler came onto the project. Michael B. Jordan is his favorite actor to work with. There was some thought that, if only we could have seen Michael B. Jordan play that part, this movie solves the problem because they both get to wear Panther suits. But I was struck by watching them was just the completely divergent styles of their performances. They are both movie stars. I love to watch them. The camera loves to watch them. It's exciting to think of all the movies they're still going to be making for years to come. But they're very different styles of stars, which may be why Jordan clashed in those scenes. Because Boseman, to me, he's a little bit like Tom Cruise in that I don't always know what he's doing. He's not, but he's holding the gravity of the movie together.
Yeah, you never question like, wait, maybe they should have made somebody else the person.
There's just this weight to his presence and his performance that anchors everything. Well, this Jordan is more like Jack Nicholson type. In terms of like,
well, I just wanted him to go for it more.
Okay,
yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like the style of movie star is like, this guy's a wild card.
Yeah.
What he is bringing isn't certainty. What he's bringing is uncertainty and chaos. And so to see them play off each other was very cool. Even if, I mean, look, you know me, audience, and Alex Shibutani, you know that like when it's CGI characters punching in
rhinos
in a mine, I'm a little bit checked out. And I was in that part of the movie too, to be totally honest with you.
I really appreciated the lack of MCU extended universe weaving it had to do. I know there was the second post-credit sequence with Bucky. Shout outs to Sebastian. But this is an example of how successful these movies can be if you don't make them also set up Ant-Man 3. You know? And I actually think Ant-Man 1 was relatively a good example of that. It was a nice comedy heist movie, had some great supporting characters. Again, not a very good villain, but I thought this movie had the most interesting villain. Miles Surrey wrote about this character on our site. I wonder if there was like a little bit left on the table for this performance and basically how much time we spend with him as a character.
Absolutely. I also think though that the time with other characters, and I know you don't disagree with me, was incredibly well spent. Yeah. Because
let's go through them. Let's
talk about movies launching a stratosphere of stars. I mean,
let's go about Martin Freeman, MVP of the movie.
Well, this was a legendary flex from Tim from the Office. Like, if you seriously though, like those of you out there like us who like watched the original British Office on DVDs that I bought when they went on sale at the Virgin Megastore in like the Union Square in New York, to think that dude in just a decade's time would be flying a virtual sand spaceship,
stopping arms shipments from leaving Wakanda.
Great look for him.
Yeah.
Great performance.
Yeah.
By the way, Circus brought it. He really seemed to be having a good time.
Is Circus juicing or is that mocap?
I think that, first of all, those ping pong balls they've been stapling to him for years, those aren't light.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he bears
So you think he got swole off of all the mocap?
I think he got super swole.
Swole off the mocap is a good
that sounds like a mixtape.
A good SoundCloud tape.
DJ Screw mixtape. Letitia Wright, who plays Shuri. Oh, hi, there's a new star.
Yeah.
Like this is just awesome. Talk about having fun and having it just be so evident how much fun you're having.
Yeah.
Not intimidated by the green screen or all of the weight of the trappings of making this movie.
Yes.
She's having a blast. She is so exciting to watch. Similarly, Winston Duke, this guy is terrific. What a great actor to be able to sell danger and menace and humor and also be a heavy. It's great. Like it's exciting when these people are on the screen and super fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, Sterling Brown, just in the brief amount of time that he's on screen, phenomenal. Angela Bassett, fantastic.
Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah. Forrest Whitaker didn't even have to change from Rogue One. Just is like still in Rogue One gear.
Still just wearing his
the
robes.
medicine man is still here. All right, obviously we love this movie. I really. Marvel movies now sort of, I don't know if I would say they are post-criticism, but I would say that they exist in like you only really can compare them to themselves. In that sense, it's probably one of the best, if not the best. I don't know if I have a deeper affection for another one.
I just really appreciate
aside from
my
like real, like how much I hold Iron Man 3 in high regard.
Well, particularly the sequence with the kid in the middle. This movie rose to the challenge and rose to the occasion, and it gave us not just visions that we hadn't seen before, but it gave us visions of tech and culture and religion and spirituality in a way we have not seen before.
Yeah.
The idea from the very opening, where there's the story is being told and it's all in sand and it's beautifully done, and then that sand becomes part of it, where she has the sand table and the sand virtual stuff. The idea of the word Afrofuturism has been thrown around a lot in writing about the movie, and that is a strain of culture that has been dormant for too long and is really ripe for re-exploration, and it's been done here. The vision of what Wakanda looks like. There is no cheesesteak scene, but we do see some grilling meats, and you guys know I love any scene that has local street food. But the vision of it, which is just this riot of culture and colors and collision of different strands of possibility. Yes, this is all fictional, but there's something that is wound together here that is inspiring.
Yeah.
There was nothing was mailed in terms of how it was going to be represented on the screen. This was not just another movie where there's tech and they yada it or in the scripts, and then they're just touching buttons.
It talks
on a
about
screen.
the actual, and Sean talked about this again. Sean's piece is really good. You should read it. But the promise that some of these things, these comic book ideals, could hold for the real world, and that's really, in some ways, it ends and Wakanda has sort of revealed itself, and T'Challa is at the UN talking about how they're ready to kind of come out into the world stage, and that will complicate, as will Avengers complicate, like the role of these characters in the greater world. I hope that when they do a second film, it's like they let Coogler or whoever make the one movie that they want to make, the James Bond movie, the whatever movie it is that's the challenge, and not there's a meteor headed for Wakanda and Iron Man has to fly through it and everything.
Let them tell this. There was a lot there. I actually think everyone should be grateful that T'Challa was introduced in Civil War, because there was just enough less.
Yeah, if they had to do that origin story
impossible.
in this movie with how, like, the origin story of Wakanda itself and the origin story of Killmonger,
Impossible.
that would have been the first 40 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked. So that was great that they did that. There was enough runway to play with. I'm very curious going forward, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as well. What are the real world implications here? Because if Wakanda is now investing like wholeheartedly in Oakland, would the Warriors stay? And will they still move to San Francisco?
Wait, what does this mean for Paul George in the offseason?
What I really wanted when that spaceship landed and the kids are like, is this yours? I wanted them to be like, this is Draymond Green's. Yeah. And everyone would have been like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me.
What is T'Challa going to do about the Oakland A's stadium situation? All right, that's it for us on Black Panther. We're going to be back after a few words from our sponsors with the great Jonathan Abrams. Andy and I we've had a lot of really great guests on this podcast before. Members of Franz Ferdinand.
Why are you taking shots at my
Laurie
interviews?
Metcalf, nominated for an Oscar, but I've never been more excited for this next guest, I'll be completely honest.
Yes.
It's our Grantland brother, Jonathan Abrams, with a best-selling new book, All the Pieces Matter, The Inside Story of The Wire. Jonathan, welcome to The Watch.
Thank you, guys. It's an honor and a privilege.
Now let's talk about Eminem for 45 minutes. Do you know Eminem is his favorite rapper?
Wow.
It is. I feel outed now, but yes.
We're here to
That
talk
was a
about,
Grantland secret, but yes.
we invited you
I thought
here-
that was open. Everybody seems to know that that's like the number one talking point about you.
All right,
is that
this
you're
is
the
gonna-
real Slim Shady.
This is going to be the next hour-long topic.
Wow.
But yes, I've never seen somebody more clever with rhymes than him.
Wow. So, but you're just talking
Rakim
about
wept.
like verbal dexterity or like the best records?
Just the way he uses words is incredible to me.
So from a technical skill, so you're talking like saying like someone has the best three-point shooting stroke. Like it's a perfect delivery, right? Not necessarily like the most recent album is your favorite rap album of the year.
No,
Because Slim Shady keeps spitting fire against Donald Trump.
nobody would ever say that somebody's 9th album is their best ever, right?
That's true.
That's true too.
That's true.
So we're here for 2 reasons: one, to roast you over your rap hot takes, and 2, to get you cast as an extra on How to Get Away with Murder. On mic, I want to apologize. We invited Abrams to come onto our show weeks ago. He arrived early, just folded himself right into the cattle call.
He's a big get now too.
Yeah, he's kind of a get. And so I don't know whether it was Scandal or How to Get Away with Murder, but you almost wound up on TV today.
It was something Shonda Rhimes related.
Yeah. They shoot right here.
So yeah, I was waiting to join you guys and be a guest.
And waiting.
And I got looped into a herd of extras trying to get into Shonda Rhimes production, and I think I may have gotten it, guys.
That's why that's the way we choose our guests. We just have them all lined up outside, and then a casting director is like, you're the one.
Be on the podcast.
Talk about streaming TV.
Let's talk about. We're going to come back to that. So, All the Pieces Matter, published last week. Congratulations! This book is truly awesome. It is an oral history of probably the greatest show of all time, The Wire. Let's go big picture. Let's talk about this, because I remember you emailed me saying you were thinking about pursuing this. You've obviously at Grantland and in other places, you've written these terrific long-form pieces. You had written this book about the high school to pro phenomenon, Boys Among Men. Why The Wire, and how did you find your way into a totally different genre for the next book?
So this was so much fun to work on, just because it wasn't sports, and it was just something different and something that I had a passion for. So my literary agent, actually brought the idea up to me when we were trying to find another project after the basketball book. And he said that, and my eyes just completely lit up, because I'd already seen The Wire 4 or 5 times. My sister had lived in Baltimore for a while, and it was something that I knew that immediately that I really, really wanted to do. And I remember we wrote this letter to David Simon telling him, like, I would be great to do this, and this is something I'm really, really passionate about. And it was probably some of the best shit I've ever written.
Just that letter.
Just that letter. And his reply back was like, whatever, he can do whatever he wants.
Was it like
that, from David Simon, that is akin to like being hugged. Like, that is the kindest response I think he's ever sent anyone.
I don't think I've ever jumped any higher.
He's a curmudgeon.
Did you guys actually send like letters back to each other, or was it emailing?
I wish it was like, me going to the post office.
And David's just like for like coffee stains and teardrops on the parchment. Yeah.
But it was an email. So he said yes. And then early on, I interviewed Alexa Fogel, who was the casting director. I actually just had breakfast with her this morning.
She's the casting director on Atlanta too. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
She told me that this morning, and I was astounded.
Good at her job.
She's very good at her job.
Yeah.
And she opened so many doors to help me get these interviews, because every time I would send an email or a phone call to somebody, like the email would come back CC'd with like 6 or 7 different people.
Yeah.
That's how many publicists these people have.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And there were so many layers to get through. And Alexa was like, she was just like, you want Idris? Here, I'll get him for you.
Yeah, because that's the thing. With a book like this, you can have the best intentions and the best ability, but unless those doors are open, you can't make a book like this. It's an oral history of the show, so you need to speak to everybody. It's right there in the title. All these pieces matter. So can you talk to us about who, you mentioned David Simon saying, okay. You mentioned Alexa Fogel. Who were the door openers, and then who were behind the tightest locked doors?
So Alexa and David were definitely the door openers. And, I kid around about David, but his assistant, her name is Rena. She was instrumental in opening doors to somebody like Ed Burns, who like never does any type of publicity, and is like this brilliant curmudgeon hidden
like
away
ex-police
in
officer,
Virginia.
right? Yeah.
He was in the police, and then he became a teacher, and he was basically a lot of season 4 storyline came out of his career. The tightest ones was Wee-Bey is not in the book. Hassan Johnson, I don't even know if the request got to him, but his publicist asked for $700 to be interviewed.
Okay.
Very specific number.
Has Hassan been busy recently? Like, what's he been working on?
I don't know.
I think he's auditioning downstairs. I think there's a chance.
Well,
He's actually on the watch in about 20 minutes.
I'm sorry. I think I got that
You
extra
got the
job
part.
over
That would
Hassan.
be the cruelest thing. This book comes out as a bestseller. He's not in it, and you stole his acting part. Okay, so he's not in it.
And Clark Johnson, who he played Gus Haynes in season 5, but more importantly, he directed the first episode and the finale. So for whatever reason, he didn't want to be interviewed. But, there's hundreds and hundreds of people involved with The Wire that I knew I wasn't going to get a couple.
Clark's an interesting guy. He's like because he's on Homicide as well. Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't want to talk.
Well, surprised and disappointed for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Was there ever a feeling like? So I mean, I guess one of my main questions is, was there anybody whose relationship to the show you were surprised by? Like, obviously, this is one of the most uniformly praised works of popular culture in the last 20 or 30 years. It's widely regarded as one of the 2 or 3 best television shows ever. Was there anybody who had a complicated relationship to either the legacy of the show or their place in the show that you were surprised to talk to and see that they had kind of like mixed emotions about everything?
So I think everybody I talked to appreciated the show, right? They can all see that they were doing something different. I think where some of the mixed emotions come in is that there's some people who, after the show, maybe weren't able to use that opportunity. Like, had The Wire been popular in real time, they would have been able to use that opportunity to catapult to something else, where it's almost like television kind of left them by.
Yeah.
And they were only universally praised for that show years after they had already moved on and been struggling.
Or people only think about them as those characters in some ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about some specific cast members and your experiences talking to them, but one of my favorite things about The Wire, and I know Chris and we share this, is the brain trust, the writer's room, because David Simon attracted such brilliant writers in their own right, like Richard Price and Dennis Lehane and George Pelecanos. And the chapters that you have in here about how they work together are some of my favorites, and the dynamic between them. There's this great anecdote about how Lehane talks about he was just trying to break something where McNulty is looking for bubbles, and it took like a day, just one of those dead ends that you can't crack. And he says, how about they just run into another CI who says, oh, he's at the soup kitchen, and all of a sudden from the corner Ed Burns just like wakes up, and it's just like, I was at Baltimore police for 20 years and no CI ever fucking knew where another CI was. And who is he, Huggy Bear? And then started calling Dennis Lehane Huggy Bear because of how lame that idea was. These are all alphas in this room, and yet they somehow created this work. What was your insight into their personalities and how they were able to sort of subsume each of their own egos into this larger project?
So that was really fun, right? Because these guys are all super acclaimed novelists. When you talk about Pelecanos and Price and Lehane, and when you're writing a novel, it's you and an editor, right? It's basically just one-on-one feedback. You put these guys in a group with 5, 6, 7 of them, and they're all trying to hustle in and get their ideas in. Not a lot of them have written for television before, and they argued a lot. I mean, I don't think there's any way getting around it. They argued a lot, and Ed Burns was a arguer. David Simon was an arguer. So they would argue for hours on minute details until, at some point, they used Pelecanos as the tiebreaker, right? Ed Burns and David Simon, where Pelecanos was kind of the adult in the room saying, hey, we got to move along and get going. And I know that Pelecanos is a friend of the podcast, but he was definitely he's a smart guy. He was good to talk to.
He has a good perspective.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's gone on obviously to produce other television shows since then. It's interesting to think about him probably like finding his role as a TV producer in that writer's room by being the de facto lifeguard,
Because the rest were just tearing at each other. The other thing that stood out to me just from the early pages of the book is that the show is serious. I mean, the show is super funny sometimes, but obviously the subject matter it dealt with was heavy. But these dudes like to go out. This cast liked to party.
Yeah.
These dudes had a little bit of thirst for adult beverages. Can you talk about some of your favorite anecdotes that you got from these guys, and maybe how many times there were just like, you could tell there were earmuffs?
There are Hennessy drinking competitions.
Yeah, or just like things that there were like ellipses left that they wouldn't tell you, where you could you could fill in the blanks yourself.
Yeah, I mean, Doug O'Leary, who played Fitz, the FBI specialist in the show, was like, there are a lot of things we did that we could have got arrested for. They would be going out all the time, and I mean, I think some of the funniest parts was them taking the underage Michael B. Jordan to strip clubs, or drinking contests between Idris Elba and John D. Williams, the actor who played Bodie, where Williams ends up just like under a table and he doesn't remember like how he got there, and his clothes
and Idris
are all
is like
off
50 pounds bigger than him, and he's still like, I got you, I can take you out. Yeah. Idris is going to those like UK garage parties, man. You can't outdrink that guy.
Idris could handle Baltimore. I
Yeah.
feel like he came in. How about those two? How about just Idris and Dominic West just surprising people with their real accents? Although, frankly, McNulty's accent was
It was not a surprise.
that was
yeah.
not a surprise.
I know. Well, the funnier thing is with Idris, like, people would be disappointed when they met him in person because they're expecting like, Stringer Bell, like this like urban guy to be representing the streets. And when he's walking around Baltimore and he's like, I'm not going to try to do a British accent because I'll just embarrass myself. But when he does it, like people were disappointed and that like weighed on him.
How about Michael Kenneth Williams, just your experience talking to him? Because obviously there are few people whose lives were as transformed as much as his was from playing Omar. And then also he struggled with the fame and has now come back to continue a terrific career.
And he also was somebody who was maybe not going to play that big of a role on the show initially.
Yeah, I just feel like in many ways, Omar is the breakout character. He won our Wire character pool on Grantland all those years ago. But his journey through the show, I think, is so emblematic of the show's role in our culture. Just coming out of nowhere and then surprising people and then disappearing and then coming back.
Yeah, I mean, well, just think about the beginning of that journey for him where Alexa Fogel just remembered that he had auditioned for her in Oz and he didn't get the part, but she remembered that he had this scar. So she's looking through all of her photos for this guy who had a scar. So that's how, I guess, underthought of he was when The Wire first started. And he was pretty sure that Omar was supposed to be killed off the first season, even though David Simon argues that point. But Michael Kay is like adamant about this. So you go from that to where all of a sudden you're President Obama's favorite TV character ever. And that can play some tricks on the mind. I mean, he was going out where people knew him as Omar, and I think he kind of felt like he lost Michael Kay there for a little while. But I also don't think that a lot of people know that. So Michael Kay was the one who discovered Snoop and got Snoop onto the show.
What was the story of that?
They met at a bar where they were just both looking at each other, and then Michael just felt that she was like pure Baltimore, and he started talking to her and told her to come by set.
And have you talked? So you talked to her for the book. Where is she in her life right now?
I think she's still acting. I want to say she's still. I mean, like, how do you go on after that role?
Yeah. It's been fascinating to see the trajectory of some of the people coming out of that show. I don't know that I would have thought Michael B. Jordan was going to be the most successful person to come out of The Wire.
Did anyone think that? Did people talk about him being like, we knew this kid was
I thought it was going to be Wood Harris in the first season. I was like, oh, that guy's a movie star. This kid is like absolutely magnetic, you know?
So the funny thing with him is that he was crying after his character. I don't want to spoil any. It's okay. Time of limitations? Is it okay?
It's statute of limitations on season 1 of The Wire.
Yeah. Also, I think that if you've been listening to The Watch for however long, you've probably gotten around to The Wire.
Let's just say he's not in season 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Wallace doesn't make it to season 2, and on his last day of filming, he's crying his eyes out. And people, like, the thing about The Wire is that when your character is written off, all of your castmates come to that final scene and they all kind of send the character off. So Andre Royo, who played Bubbles, is like confiding in him, like, you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine, you're going to go on. And Michael B. Jordan is saying that this is going to be it for him in television, that he's never going to get another role, that he loved playing Wallace, and that he's fallen in love with acting now, and he's worried that this is going to be it. So yeah, they're very proud of his career progression and where he's gone on since. I was actually talking to Alexa Fogel this morning, and she said she had talked to Michael a couple days ago, and she was like, I can't believe that you got cast in something with this many black people and I wasn't involved.
That's her thing.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the later seasons of the show. There's a really interesting bit in the book about Dominic West asking basically to be not used very heavily in the 4th season because he wanted to spend more time with his children in England, on the contingency that he could come back also and direct some of the 5th season, and that he then had regrets, it seemed like, about missing out on the 4th season a little bit. Did you feel like this show, because the show in a lot of ways comes to a conclusion in some ways in the 3rd season. You know, the first 3 seasons of the show can be read as
the Barksdale arc.
Yeah, and even with the 2nd season, I think it does a lot to expand the world of how things are coming in and out of the city. But how do you feel about the 4th season? And could you talk a little bit about Dominic's relationship to it, since he's ostensibly the star of the show that then disappears for an entire season of it?
I mean, the 4th season to me is, I'm not the television expert here, you guys are, but that's the best season of television I've ever seen. And the reason why it seems like the book is closed after those first 3 seasons is because HBO was set on canceling the show, basically. So just the thought of not getting that 4th season just is enough to keep me up at night, because I think that 4th season is so big in kind of explaining why it's so hard for a lot of kids in urban cities to just lift themselves up by their bootstraps. But yeah, I mean, I think Dominic West saw that season and he was like, damn, that was good.
Because I wonder, I don't know who he would have played. Would they have made him the Prez arc? I wonder what, because I was always curious about if HBO had said to Simon, either A, you have as many seasons as you want, or B, let's do this in 5, or you tell us when you want to end it. Would 3 have been different? And I can't imagine it, because like to your point where you're saying 4, I think 3 is thematically, dramatically, and just in terms of just pure creative act is like an absolutely perfect piece of television, the 3rd season. The way in which it introduces ideas at the beginning of the season that destroy some characters and lift other characters up is just mind-blowing to me in a way that I've never seen before. And it's very strange to look back and be like, and then the show should have ended on that season because the 4th season was so great.
Yep.
But I'm curious as to whether Simon would have adjusted whether the Stringer Avon story would have ended, or if the Marlowe season, or if Marlowe would have been different had he known he was going to get a 4th and 5th season.
It's a great question. A good reporter should have asked that.
So you do a sequel.
What do you think, in talking to these guys, especially Simon, who has thoughts about everything and reflections on everything, how does he particularly feel about the legacy of the show? I mean, I'm sure that if you had told anyone involved with it during production that anyone would be writing a book, cataloging the highs and lows and the details of it, they would have laughed because no one was watching the show. We're now X number of years on, and the legacy of the show is certainly secure and only growing as more people discover it. What does Simon think about that legacy? Because I think there's always something that bothers him. He's never satisfied. It's what makes him a great artist and a great follow on Twitter, frankly. What gets under his skin still about whether the way the show is received or not received?
So, I mean, it's not an entertainment show for him. It's a show about arguments. It's a show about how institutions are failing the individual people, and I think that's the most disappointing part of it to him, is that a lot of the argument is, oh, Stringer is cool, oh, right, Omar is cool, where people aren't really taking his arguments into focus. But I mean, it's tough viewing, right? You have to watch it more than once to kind of realize the arguments that he is trying to make. And I remember the first time I watched that show, I was looking at how cool Omar was, or these characters I had never seen before, and it wasn't until I watched it multiple times where these type of themes you pick up.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is something I feel strongly about. I mean, I think the show is a masterpiece because it was also entertaining. If it was just purely polemical, it would be important viewing, but it wouldn't necessarily be entertaining viewing. And the fact that they were able to pull this off the way that they did, that we can care so much about those kids, but also laugh when it's appropriate to laugh. And I'm thinking of like the big wake scenes, or just the any bunk scene involving a bathrobe. There was so much joy and life in the show, and they never got away from that. And I think that's something that Simon has struggled with in later shows, although I think he's found that balance again in The Deuce.
It's also interesting to think back, especially with the 3rd season. There's this Lin-Manuel Miranda profile in the Times this weekend that was about Hamilton as this kind of artifact of like the Obama era, and like some of the wonder and optimism and idealism that was created out of that, and the way in which people were reckoning with America in a way that was, obviously like inspired some sort of romanticism. And I was curious about what it felt like kind of assembling this book, probably in the last 2 years, right? And the country, the Obama era comes to an end, the country is changing. In a way, when you watch The Wire, the themes of it, especially in the 4th season, where it's like these institutions that are negligent, but I don't know if they're openly hostile. You get to see a lot of people in these institutions that wish they could do the right thing, but their hands are tied behind their back by bureaucracy or red tape or whatever. And now I think we're starting to have this attitude about a lot of the institutions in America where there's like, are these actually like enemies of the state? Are these actually, are these something like,
to piggyback on that, we seem to be talking about systemic failures. Those seem to be words we use now in this country. Whereas when The Wire was showing us what systemic failure
like erosion.
We weren't maybe nationally having that conversation.
Yeah, and I think one of David Simon's big things was he was having a conversation with Lance Reddick, who played Cedric Daniels, where David told Lance that institutions can't be changed, but individuals can. And that was one of the big arguments that he was trying to make.
in the show, in the life of the show.
Yeah.
Since writing it, and now you're out promoting it, and you're talking to people like us about it, and you're probably going to be doing events, what has surprised you the most about the feedback you've gotten from viewers of the show, readers of the book, people who are either involved with the show or just fans of it?
I think just how passionate people are about the show and how many people have seen it multiple times. And on the other flip side of that coin, I'm still astonished by how many people haven't seen the show.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people come up to me and say they've never seen The Wire, that maybe they watched the first 2 episodes and couldn't go on. And just once you get through those first, I'd say 4 episodes and see how they're building up the world, then it just takes off and you can't stop watching it.
There's so many things that people say they love now about television, the way television is constructed, the types of shows we're getting. The DNA for it, not politically, not thematically, but the structural DNA is in The Wire. I mean, I still think about how Bunny Colvin shows up at the end of season 2, and you're like, who's this guy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then, oh, this guy in the background is going to become a major and beloved character in what's to come. The sense of planning,
Yeah,
and that there's worlds behind worlds. I mean, this is what we all look for in TV shows. I mean, you know, everyone listens to the show knows I think Westworld is a failure, but it's chasing a similar idea, even though I think
It's that sensation that if you pan the camera a little to the left, there would be a whole other part of the world that you would get to see, and that they've actually thought about what's off camera. And that bit that we excerpted on The Ringer from the book about the mayoral race and Glenn Turman coming from the Sahara set and being
With
like,
the
I can't
beard,
get rid of the goatee, and Simon's like, it's okay. Next season, when you're running for mayor, we'll have you shave so that you'll look younger because you're going to be running against this younger candidate. And I was like, how did they think of that? That's wild, man. They didn't even know if the show was coming back.
That's when Glenn was like, who the hell am I working
Yeah,
with?
yeah.
who, after your time with the cast and crew, who would you like to personally champion to get back on the pop cultural radar? Who do you think deserves better from the world?
That's easy. Andre Royo, the actor who played
Yeah.
Bubbles, he was just amazing in that role, and the depths to which he went and tore himself up to be able to play Bubbles is amazing. To me, he was the heart of that show, and he's the heart of this book. I mean, he was one of the best interviews I think I've ever had, just because of how open and honest he was and how his memory was as sharp as ever. And when you're playing an addict like that on television, it's hard to get another role. I think his point was like, for somebody like Stringer Bell, there's always going to be another leader position for Idris to play, or there's always going to be another cop for Dominic West to play. But where does somebody who portrayed an addict for several years go? And I think now his career is starting to bounce back, but it was a struggle for him for a little while.
I just wanted to ask you about the 5th season, because I know that from some of our our Grantland coworkers that we used to have, and then also even just to today. I mean, like if I talk about this with Fantasy or whoever, there's a lot of debate about the 5th season, because I think some people found the serial killer, air quotes, plot line to be a little bit heavy-handed, but also like not of the show. It was something that they found like a little bit. And then there was some questions about like some of the journalism storylines where it was like before, when you're watching something about drug dealers and cops and you're not a drug dealer or a cop, you're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to take this at face value. But when you see certain journalism things, you're like, I don't know, would that really have happened that way? And you're a journalist, you've worked in newsrooms. Like, what did you think of the 5th season?
Yeah, so I think I was at the Los Angeles Times or New York Times when the 5th season aired, watching it real time. I couldn't believe how much stuff was accurate and on point, and how much stuff he had gotten right in the newsroom, as far as how a newsroom feels, and a newsroom that's going through layoffs while this show is watching. So it was almost emotional to be watching it while it was on air at the time. The thing you have to remember about season 5 is that David Simon got squeezed for episodes.
Oh, right.
So he wasn't able to build out, say, a character like Scott Templeton, who should have been built out more. He felt very one-sided, which is not one of the Wire's traits, right?
Yep.
And David admitted if he had more episodes, he would have been able to show Scott Templeton doing better journalism to kind of round out that character.
To buttress it, yeah.
What I will say is that the finale and the way they closed that series was just simply amazing. Because I remember going into the finale wondering how in the world he was going to close off so many storylines, and just the way the finale played out, I thought he did it perfectly.
Yeah, the final montage is a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So to wrap up, your season 4. You ride for season 4. Can you rank them? All
I will.
5?
I will. And it's funny because it keeps changing in my head.
Yeah.
I was not a big season 2 guy.
Yeah.
But after doing this book and after seeing the series multiple times, I'm very appreciative of how it rounds out the whole landscape and builds out the universe. So I will go 5, 3.
You're starting from worst to best.
Best to worst.
Let's do best to worst. So four is best.
I'm sorry. I don't know what I was starting at. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go 4, 3, 1, 2, 5.
Okay.
I am with you, except I swapped 3 and 4. At 3, I'm with Chris. Like, I think that the kid storyline in 4 is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen on television, and that alone puts it close to, if not at the top. But I think there was something that was just electrifying about 3. And any season that has that Stringer Barksdale conversation on the balcony, that the Pelicanos wrote, that has to be number 1.
It's also got it's so many amazing moments from 3. The brown bag scene that I think Price wrote that, right? Just Bunny's brown bag speech, and I go 3, 1, 2, 4, 5.
Because you just love the Barksdales.
I just think that 1, 2, and 3 in a way, and especially obviously 1 and 3, but that's like the Godfather trilogy. I mean, like that's one of the great American crime stories ever told.
That is the lowest I've ever heard 4.
Really? I cannot separate how agonizing it was to watch. Like it never felt. I dreaded watching it every week because I was so nervous for those kids.
Did you know Chris put Sneaky Pete on his top 10 list of TV
All right,
from last
I'm
year?
just trying
So
to keep it creative.
There's some takes going on. No, but look, this is arguing over like children. Like I agree with you. 5 was problematic and difficult, but I think that you really hit the nail on the head. It was not a traditional Wire season.
Yeah.
It probably could have been better, and of course, Simon being Simon admits that. But look, this is a fun debate to have. This is, if not the best, one of the top 2 or 3 shows in history, and you've written a book that is worthy of that mantle too. This book is awesome. If you love how TV is made, if you love The Wire, if you love hearing Jonathan Abrams talk about his aborted television acting career that just started and ended this morning, pick up All the Pieces Matter.
And please buy the real Slim Shady. Support struggling rappers.
Maybe Amazon could do like a package, right?
Yeah,
Full
that's
box
right.
deal.
Marshall Mathers.
No, but not Marshall Mathers. Buy like Revival. Like buy like late period.
Yeah.
You know, Walking on Water at Marshall.
Get at me, Slim.
Wow.
Thanks, Abrams.